All right, hello class. I am now beginning the reading lecture, video lecture for our hybrid class, ESL 42. I'm hoping that you'll be able to see the highlights that I put on my chapter. Again, my assumption now is that you've finished this chapter. You've read it, you've annotated it, and you've done the exercises before starting this video. So, if you have not done that, stop right now. Go back and finish the chapter, reading and practices, and then come back and watch the video. Please, that's going to be part of your learning and homework assignment. So please make sure that's done. Because I'm not sure how well this will show up on the video, I can see it on the monitor, but I'm not sure how well you can see it. You may want to follow along with me. I will try to announce the page numbers. So for example, if you can't see this particular highlight that I put on my document, then you may want to just look at your own book on page 103 at the bottom, and then you'll be able to identify the things that I've marked. What I'm essentially going to do now that you've finished reading and annotating and doing the practices in chapter 3 is I'm going to review that chapter with you now and talk about the things that I feel are important that you should pay attention to both in your study and in preparation for the test. Okay, so first thing we see is a definition of supporting details at the bottom of page 103. So at this point, you should have your book open to 103. If you've done the homework, I would have expected you to underline that because you know all kinds of bold-faced words are important to mark in some way. You can put a mark in the margins or however you want to do that, but it's simply saying that supporting details are reasons, examples, facts, steps, and other kinds of evidence that explain the main idea. So in most cases, a piece of writing has a main idea, but then the writer wants to give the reader some more information about his position, whatever he's writing about, and that's when he or she gives the supporting details for that particular piece of writing. Okay? So make sure that you write that and you understand what supporting details are. Okay. Again, I'm hoping that you can see this. I am looking at the top of page 104, and I wanted to point out how I've annotated this particular paragraph. Obviously, they're indicating a paragraph with strong support. Again, if you can't see this, I'm looking at the top of page 104. 104. And it says, here's our main idea. Many people are strangely passive when they visit the doctor. Passive means they're not active or trying to do anything. And then they give us some transition signals or some list words. First of all, secondly, last of all. So these are signals that tell you the kinds of passive behavior that people often do. So we see main idea, and then these are the supporting points, major and minor. Okay? So then they give you an explanation for that at the bottom of the page. Let's move now over to the next page. All right, this is 105. Once again, I'm asking you to check your own annotations. This is the kind of markings that I would expect you to put on page 105, and if you have not done that, then I think you should consider putting these marks in. Again, this is practice for the tests and future reading assignments, of course, to help you identify what's important and how it's, what the main idea and importantly, what's the support of that idea. So you see that I've underlined again another definition of major details explain and develop the main idea, and in turn the minor details help fill out and make clear the major details. So I'm going to talk about some outlining here in just a minute. So it's hard to see that, but give me a minute and then I will show that to you. Okay, so make a point that this is how you should have annotated it. Again, I assume you've already done this, but if you haven't, in this lecture, I'm asking you to check your work. And if you did not do it as I've done it, ask yourself why. Because I'd like you to do that in future. Okay, the next part leads us into outlining. And often your teachers may ask you to do some outlining. And when we do an outline, obviously we need to identify the major, main supporting points and the minor details that add information. So they've given you a short paragraph here to discuss in terms of, they're talking about school bullies. Bullies are people, usually big people that are beat up on little people, make them cry, that sort of thing. All right, so unfortunately, that's common in our schools. So take a look at this. Here, when we talk about outlining, we want to make sure, and I think maybe now we can look at my writing here. Let me turn this off so you can see it a little more easily. All right, now I'm not sure how much you can see of this outline. I tried to check it with the video, but let's take a look. Main ideas are always the further over. If you're looking at a piece of paper, the main idea is always the further over to the left-hand side. So here's where we start your main idea. What do you want to support? You'll see that a little bit over is the first major support, number 1, and that's how you would write that underneath in an outline. So we start with the most general umbrella ideas, the main idea. You remember we talked about that. And then a more specific idea that supports the main idea, and you see we move that over to the right one step. After we finish this major supporting detail, if we're writing an outline, then we move minor details, which are examples, definitions, facts, statistics, things that might also support the major point. We move those over again, and often we label them Roman numeral 1, 2, 3 for main ideas, A and B and C for major support, and then 1, 2, 3 for minor support. That can change based on what kind of outline you're looking at, but generally speaking, they just have different labels for the different support. So the last thing I want to say about making an outline is that the more general the idea is, like the main idea, it's going to be farther over to the left. And then each time you indent farther over, you're getting more and more specific. So this is the minor details would be the most specific things, exact examples, definitions, statistics, things like that. All right, so now we've talked a little bit about how an outline is created. We'll take a look at some of the tips that can help you with an outline. And now I've moved over to page 107. We're looking at 107 here. Obviously, you want to always be familiar with words inside a box. Here's the first tip. It says look for words that tell you a list of details are coming. We've already looked at that, but again, it's part of not only just knowing that you should do that, but practicing that. So make sure that you do that here as well. On the next page, here's 108. On page 108, you have tip number 2. Again, this is a repeat of stuff that we've already been practicing. Look for words that signal major details. And here, example of list words. Always mark those and be sure to review them again. Then they're asking you to do some work on the bullying article, which I assume you've done that. All right, then, here. Our last tip on page 109 for outlining, it says this is what I was just explaining, when making an outline, put all supporting details of equal importance the same distance from the left margin. And that's what we talked about here. So all major support will be indented once, all minor support will be indented again, so it just moves right over that way when you're trying to analyze an outline. Here they give you an example as well. So you have a major detail, then minor detail. Major detail, minor detail. So you see the more specific, the farther you move over this way when you're making an outline. Okay? So there's some practices there about making an outline, and I'm hoping that you did those by now and you've checked your answers. Make sure in the margins you write down any questions that you might have on this so that you can ask me when we come into class next time. There's more than one way to organize a reading selection, and the second way, outside of outlining, is called mapping. And here they give you an example. It says, students sometimes find it helpful to use maps rather than outlines. Maps, here's a definition, maps or diagrams are highly visual outlines in which circles, boxes, or other shapes show the relationships between the main idea and the main supporting details. Again, if you did not mark that, I'm recommending that you do that now. Now, I won't talk too much about this. Obviously, my expectation is you've done it, you've checked your answers, and you see this, but here's some examples what mapping looks like. Again, we're using box. Main idea up here, and then each box includes some kind of supporting detail. It can also be made in a circular way, kind of like this one. You can see that. Okay, and then in this particular case, I'm moving that up. I'm looking at page 113 here. It could also be that you put the main idea in the center and the main supporting points around the outside. I prefer the box because it shows the organization of the essay a little bit better, but either way is fine. Okay. The next thing I want to talk a little bit about, and we will be writing some summaries here for this class. So let's talk a little bit about what it means to write a summary. We'll continue to practice this, but this is important. So we have here a short, page 115. Again, if you can't see this, page 115, so you can look at your own book if it's hard to see this. All right, so we have a paragraph at the top, and then you'll see my notations that this would be the study notes that goes with that. All right, so we see here in the paragraph that it's about, let's see, some circumstances, the most effective way of coping with stress is withdrawal, and then they give you a definition. So they tell you summary, withdrawal, coping with stress by avoiding a situation, and then they give an example. So that's the kind of notes. You can see how much shorter that is, the summary, than the original article. And the reason for that, of course, is because they're only giving you the main idea and a couple of examples to help remind you. This is a type of study note that you'd take in any other class. Sociology, history, psychology. This is the same thing that you would do with those. Again, take a large amount of information and put it down in as small as possible. So how do we do that? It says, summarizing often involves 2 steps. So here's the first step. And again, if you didn't mark that in your book, as I've done, you should do that right now. And I'd wonder why you didn't mark that. So again, as I show you my annotations, I'd like you to be thinking, whenever you don't mark something that I have marked, ask yourself why you didn't see that as important. Because I'd like this to be some practice for your future academic work where you're having to read maybe even longer selections than these. So if you don't mark it, you're going to have to go back and read the whole thing over again. Remember, when I ask you to read and annotate, I'm really trying to save you time. Because the day before our test on this issue, you don't want to have to go back and read the entire chapter again. You want to go back and remind yourself, oh, yeah, I remember that part. And that's the way you study. Okay, so it says when you're summarizing, you're going to select one example from several that might be given. So let's say they give you 2 or 3 examples of something. You don't have to write all 3 examples down. Examples, again, are just minor details that help you understand something. So just make one of those examples to help your memory remember what that's about. Okay? Let's see. Okay, and the next thing, condense the example if it's not already very brief. So you might change from a long sentence to a much shorter one. And then this hint at the bottom of the page, let me move that up, make sure you can kind of see that. Again, we're looking at the bottom of page 115. Study hint, if you have a textbook chapter to learn, very often you can get what you need by doing 2 things. Writing down definitions in the chapter along with summarized examples of the definitions. And 2, writing down lists of major supporting details and any minor details that you think are important. And what do I mean by you think are important? That means things that would help you clarify the meaning of something. Sometimes an example can, help you understand that particular point. So these are outlining and summary. So there's a relationship between outlines and summaries. Usually a 3-step process. You would read and annotate an article, then you would outline the article, and then you'd use the outline to write a summary of the article. And we will be doing that in this class for our classwork here. So keep that in mind as we move forward. Okay, I'll let you do the next couple of pages. Then the last thing I want to talk about in this chapter is the final note. And so go ahead and mark that. And of course, chapter review. These are things that you would want to look at right before a test, for example. So the final note says, this chapter is centered on supporting details as they appear in well-organized paragraphs. But, I prefer however. However, keep in mind that supporting details are part of reading of any length and include sections that may not have an easy-to-follow list of one major detail after another. What's my message? My message here is think. Okay? You're not always going to have nice, clear first, second, third. Sometimes you're going to have to read and think at the same time to figure out what the major and the minor details are there. Okay.